The sky was a perfect blue outside the airplane window as Flight 372 soared at 30,000 feet. The Matthews family had been counting down the days to this vacation for almost a year. Denise Matthews checked her watch. They were exactly 2 hours into their journey from Chicago to Orlando, and so far, so good. Denise smiled as she watched her 8-year-old twin daughters, Kiki and Kayla, sitting quietly beside her. They were practically vibrating with excitement about their very first trip to the famous theme parks of Florida. This vacation was extra special. It was their first real family trip since the world had reopened after those long, difficult months stuck at home. "Mom, look what I drew," Kiki said, holding up her travel sketchbook to show a colorful drawing of their whole family riding a roller coaster. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation behind her purple-framed glasses. "That's beautiful, honey," Denise replied, admiring the artwork. She felt a swell of pride looking at her daughters. They were dressed in matching yellow sundresses that their grandmother had sent specially for the trip. Their hair was styled in neat braids with sunny yellow beads that clicked softly whenever they moved their heads. Fellow passengers had been commenting all day about how adorable and well-behaved they were. Denise herself had dressed comfortably for the flight in dark jeans and a flowing blouse. As a civil rights attorney with her own small practice, she rarely got to take time off. This trip had been planned around court dates and client meetings, a delicate balancing act that had finally paid off. She had promised herself to leave work behind completely. Her phone was set to emergency contacts only. "Mom?" Kayla suddenly whispered, leaning close to her mother's ear. "I really need to use the bathroom." She squirmed slightly in her seat, her expression growing anxious. Denise nodded and glanced up at the illuminated seatbelt sign. It had been turned on about 20 minutes earlier when they'd hit a patch of mild turbulence. Nothing serious, just enough gentle rocking to notice. But in those 20 minutes, Denise had observed at least 4 passengers walking to and from the restrooms without any issues. "Of course, sweetheart. Let me get the flight attendant's attention." Denise pressed the call button above her seat and waited patiently. She noticed Kayla crossing her legs tightly. The girl definitely couldn't wait much longer. After about a minute, a flight attendant made her way down the aisle. She was an older woman, maybe in her mid-50s, with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and a name tag that read Beverly. She didn't quite make eye contact as she approached their row. "Excuse me," Denise said with a warm smile. "My daughter really needs to use the restroom. I know the seatbelt sign is on, but I've noticed others have been going and it seems pretty smooth right now." Beverly's eyes barely flickered toward Kayla before she responded in a clipped tone. "The seatbelt sign is on for your safety. She'll have to wait until the captain turns it off." The coldness in her voice took Denise by surprise. She noticed Beverly hadn't spoken that way to the previous passengers she'd interacted with. "I understand, but she's only 8 and it's quite urgent," Denise explained calmly. "Is there any way you could make an exception? It won't take long." Beverly's expression hardened. "I already told you no. Rules are rules. You'll have to wait." She turned away before Denise could respond further. Kayla looked up at her mother, with worried eyes. "It's okay, Mom, I can try to hold it," she whispered, though her discomfort was obvious. Denise rubbed her daughter's back reassuringly. "It's all right, baby. The sign should be off soon." But she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about this interaction. 5 minutes passed and now Kiki was also beginning to fidget. "Mom, I need to go too," she whispered urgently. The turbulence had completely subsided, yet the seatbelt sign remained illuminated. Denise noticed a businessman from first class stroll to the bathroom without any flight attendant stopping him. She pressed the call button again. When Beverly returned, her face had already set into a frown before she even reached their row. "Yes?" she asked with visible impatience. "I'm sorry to bother you again," Denise said, keeping her voice level despite her growing frustration. "But now both my daughters need to use the bathroom urgently. The turbulence seems to have passed, and I've noticed several other passengers using the facilities. Ma'am, as I've already explained, the seatbelt sign is on. The captain has not cleared movement in the cabin. Your children will have to wait," Beverly responded, speaking slowly as if Denise might not understand English. "Well, At that moment, Kiki let out a small whimper, fighting back tears as she squeezed her sister's hand. "They're just children," Denise said, her lawyer's instincts kicking in as she carefully controlled her tone. "Surely there must be some flexibility when it comes to young kids who can't wait as long as adults." Beverly's lips pressed into a thin line. "Perhaps you should have taken them before boarding," she suggested with a hint of condescension. "I need to attend to other passengers now." As Beverly walked away, Denise noticed a young woman about 3 rows ahead raise her hand. The same flight attendant approached her immediately with a completely transformed demeanor, pleasant, smiling, and nodding. To Denise's disbelief, Beverly then gestured toward the bathroom, clearly giving permission. The young woman, who had fair skin and blonde hair, stood up and walked to the lavatory without any issue. No warning about the seatbelt sign. No lecture about rules. Denise felt her heart begin to pound. After 15 years as a civil rights attorney, she knew exactly what she was witnessing. She thought about the 4 other passengers she'd seen use the bathroom during this seatbelt-required period. All of them had been allowed to go without question, and none of them looked like her family. Kayla tugged on her sleeve, tears now forming in her eyes. "Mom, I really can't hold it much longer," she whispered, her voice trembling with the effort of maintaining control. Denise took a deep breath and looked at her daughter's distressed faces. Something inside her shifted from concerned mother to fierce advocate. She reached for her phone and subtly turned on the voice recorder app, placing it in her shirt pocket. Then she pressed the call button again, preparing herself for what might come next. This was supposed to be the start of their dream vacation, but instead, it was becoming a lesson in dignity and justice that her daughters shouldn't have had to learn. At least not like this, not at 8 years old. As she waited for Beverly to return, Denise resolved that this situation would not end here. Not by a long shot. Beverly took her time returning to their row. Denise could see the flight attendant chatting with another crew member, occasionally glancing in their direction. Meanwhile, both Kiki and Kayla were now visibly uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and trying their best to control themselves. The businessman who had used the bathroom earlier walked past their row on his way back to his seat. He gave Denise a sympathetic look as he noticed the twins' distress. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. "Not really," Denise replied in a low voice. "My daughters need the bathroom, but we've been told they can't go because of the seatbelt sign." The man frowned. "That's strange. They just let me use it without saying anything about the sign." "I noticed," Denise said with a tight smile. "Thanks for your concern." As the man continued to his seat, Beverly finally approached their row again. Her expression was even more closed off than before. "Yes?" she asked, her tone making it clear she found their repeated calls annoying. Denise had spent years in courtrooms, staying calm under pressure, and she drew on that experience now. "I need to understand something," she began evenly. "In the past 30 minutes, I've counted at least 5 passengers who've been allowed to use the restroom while the seatbelt sign is on. Why are my daughters being denied the same consideration?" Beverly's posture stiffened. "Ma'am, I'm simply following protocol for passenger safety. The air can get turbulent without warning." "I understand safety concerns," Denise replied. "But it seems the protocol isn't being applied equally to all passengers. My daughters are in genuine distress." Kayla was now holding back tears, her small hands pressed against her stomach. Kiki had her legs crossed tightly and was biting her lip. Beverly's voice rose slightly. "Are you accusing me of something?" The question came out loud enough that several nearby passengers turned to look. "I'm asking why different passengers are receiving different treatment," Denise clarified, keeping her voice steady despite her rising anger. "My daughters are 8 years old. This is becoming an emergency situation." "The seatbelt sign is on for safety reasons," Beverly repeated louder now as if volume would make her point more valid. "If you continue to be disruptive, there will be consequences." The word consequences hung in the air between them. Denise felt a familiar heat rising in her chest, the same feeling she got when witnessing injustice in her professional life. But this was different. This was personal. These were her children. I don't understand what's disruptive about asking for help for my children, Denise said. She was aware that many passengers were now watching the exchange. They're uncomfortable and in pain. Surely there must be some compassion in your airline's policy. Beverly leaned closer, lowering her voice. Listen, I've told you repeatedly what the policy is. If you can't accept that, perhaps you shouldn't be flying with children. The comment was so unexpected and unprofessional that Denise was momentarily stunned. Before she could respond, a woman across the aisle spoke up. "Excuse me?" said the woman who had been quietly observing the entire situation. She was Asian American, in her early 40s, wearing a simple blouse and slacks. "I couldn't help overhearing. I'm Dr. Lin, a pediatrician, and those children clearly need to use the bathroom. The turbulence is minimal. There's no safety issue here that I can see." Beverly barely glanced at Dr. Lin. "I'm handling this situation, ma'am." "But you're not handling it," came another voice from the row behind them. An older gentleman with salt and pepper hair leaned forward. "I've been watching people go to the bathroom for the last half hour with no problem. What's different about these little girls?" Beverly's face flushed. "I am not going to stand here and be accused of..." "Of what?" Denise asked quietly. "Nobody's accusing you of anything. We're simply asking for the same treatment others have received." By now, Kayla was silently crying, tiny tears rolling down her cheeks as she tried to be brave. The sight of her daughter's distress was the final straw for Denise. "I need to speak with the lead flight attendant," she said firmly. "Now please." "I am the lead flight attendant on this section," Beverly replied, her voice clipped. "Then I need to speak with your supervisor or the captain." Beverly's eyes narrowed. "That won't be possible during the flight." "Mom," Kiki whispered urgently, tugging at Denise's sleeve. The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. Dr. Lin stood up. "This is becoming a health issue," she said with professional authority. "Forcing children to hold their urine for extended periods can lead to urinary tract infections and other complications. As a medical professional, I'm advising that these children be allowed to use the restroom immediately." A murmur of agreement rippled through the nearby passengers. Someone a few rows back called out, "Let the kids go to the bathroom already." Beverly looked around, suddenly aware that public opinion was firmly against her. Her professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing what looked like genuine disdain before she composed herself again. "Fine," she said coldly. "One at a time, and be quick about it." Denise helped Kayla unbuckle her seatbelt. As her daughter stood, shaky with relief, Denise noticed Beverly turn away without offering to help or show them to the bathroom, something she had done for other passengers. "I'll walk her," Dr. Lin offered kindly. "You stay with your other daughter." Denise nodded gratefully as Dr. Lin escorted Kayla to the lavatory. While they were gone, the gentleman behind them leaned forward. "Again, you should document this," he said quietly. "I'm a retired HR director. What happened here isn't right." "Already on it," Denise replied, patting her pocket where her phone was still recording. "Thank you for speaking up." When Kayla returned with Dr. Lin, Kiki took her turn. By the time both girls were back in their seats, the seatbelt sign had finally turned off, nearly 45 minutes after it had been illuminated. "You handled that really well, Mom," Kiki whispered, her natural resilience returning now that the immediate crisis had passed. Denise squeezed her daughter's hand. "Thank you, sweetie." But inside she was far from calm. The humiliation her daughters had endured, being treated differently because of who they were, ignited a slow-burning determination. This wasn't just about bathroom access. This was about dignity, equality, and the fundamental right to be treated with basic human respect. As Beverly walked by their row again, purposely avoiding eye contact, Denise took out her phone. She stopped the voice recording and opened her email app. Then she began typing detailed notes about everything that had happened, including times, quotes, and the names of passengers who had witnessed the incident. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The vacation might have just begun, but Denise Matthews civil rights attorney and mother of two beautiful black girls, had already shifted into a mode that many powerful institutions had learned to fear. She was now a woman on a mission. For the remainder of the flight, Beverly made herself scarce in their section of the plane. Other flight attendants came by with drinks and snacks, offering kind smiles to the twins that made it clear they had heard about the incident. One younger attendant named Miguel whispered a quick, "I'm sorry about what happened," as he handed the girls their apple juice. The twins had recovered from their ordeal and were now coloring in their travel books. But Denise noticed how Kiki kept looking up nervously whenever anyone in a uniform walked by. It broke her heart to see that shadow of worry in her daughter's eyes, a new wariness that hadn't been there before. Dr. Lin from across the aisle came over during a quiet moment to check on them. "The girls doing okay now?" she asked kindly. "They're bouncing back," Denise replied. "Thank you again for stepping in. I'm Denise, by the way." "Helen," the doctor replied, offering her hand. "Listen, I've got 3 kids of my own and what happened wasn't right. If you need a witness statement or anything, here's my card." Denise took the business card gratefully. "I practice civil rights law, so unfortunately, I know exactly what to do in situations like this." Helen raised an eyebrow. "They picked the wrong mom to mess with, huh?" That earned a small smile from Denise. "You could say that." As Helen returned to her seat, the retired HR director behind them leaned forward again. "Name's Robert," he said. "Got a pen? I want to give you my contact info, too. Been flying this airline for 30 years and never seen anything like this." By the time they began their descent into Orlando, Denise had collected contact information from 6 passengers who had witnessed the incident and were willing to provide statements. But collecting evidence was just the beginning. As an attorney, Denise knew that creating the right kind of pressure required strategy. While the twins watched the Florida landscape grow larger through the window, Denise began drafting an email on her phone. The subject line read, "Incident Report, Discriminatory Treatment of Minor Children on Flight 372, Urgent Attention Required." She addressed it to the airline's CEO, COO, Chief Diversity Officer, Head of Customer Experience, and Legal Counsel. All email addresses she could easily find on the company's website. Years of experience had taught her that reaching multiple decision-makers simultaneously was more effective than starting at the bottom. Her email was precise, factual, and devastating in its clarity. "Today on Flight 372 from Chicago to Orlando, my 8-year-old twin daughters were repeatedly denied access to the restroom by lead flight attendant Beverly, last name, while the seatbelt sign was illuminated. During this same period, at least 6 other passengers, none of whom were black, were permitted bathroom access by the same flight attendant. When questioned about this discrepancy in treatment, the flight attendant became hostile, threatening consequences for my asking why my children were being treated differently. She continued with a detailed timeline, mentioned the professional, witnesses including a medical doctor who had intervened, and noted that she had audio recording of portions of the interaction. She was careful not to make direct accusations of racial discrimination in writing, but the implication was unmistakable in her meticulous documentation of who had been allowed bathroom access and who had been denied. The plane landed with a gentle bump, and the girls clapped with excitement. Despite the unpleasant start, they were finally in Orlando. As they taxied to the gate, Denise finished her email. "As a civil rights attorney with 15 years of experience, I recognize the serious nature of what transpired today. I expect a response from your leadership team within 24 hours regarding immediate actions to be taken, including a formal investigation into this incident, appropriate disciplinary measures for the staff involved, review of your policies regarding restroom access during flights, compensation for the distress caused to my minor children. I sincerely hope we can resolve this matter promptly and appropriately. If not, I am prepared to pursue all available legal remedies, including filing formal complaints with the Department of Transportation and the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. I look forward to your immediate response." She clicked send just as the seatbelt sign turned off. The email would be waiting for the executives when they started their workday tomorrow. "Mom, are we going to see Mickey today?" Kayla asked. as they gathered their belongings. "You bet we are," Denise replied, tucking her phone away and focusing on her daughters. She was determined not to let this incident overshadow their vacation. "We're going to have the best time ever." As they made their way off the plane, Denise noticed Beverly standing at the exit, offering perfunctory thanks to deplaning passengers. When it was their turn, Beverly's smile faltered, but she managed a tight, "Thank you for flying with us," without making eye contact. Denise paused briefly. "My daughters have a question," she said pleasantly. Beverly looked startled as both girls looked up at her. Denise nodded encouragingly to her daughters. "Why didn't you let us use the bathroom when you let other people go?" Kiki asked, with the straightforward curiosity only a child could muster. Beverly's face flushed. She glanced around nervously, aware of passengers slowing down behind them, listening. "I was, following protocol," she stammered. "But not for everyone," Kayla added, her voice small but clear. "Just for us. It made us feel really bad." Before Beverly could respond, a man in a pilot's uniform appeared at her side. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, looking between Beverly and the family. "Not anymore," Denise said calmly. "My daughters just had a question about inconsistent enforcement of bathroom privileges during the flight. We'd be happy to discuss it further if you have time." The pilot looked confused, but something in Denise's steady gaze made him take her seriously. "I'd like to hear more about this, if you wouldn't mind waiting at the gate." "Unfortunately, we have a schedule to keep today," Denise replied, checking her watch. "But don't worry, I've already sent a comprehensive email to your corporate leadership team. I'm sure they'll brief you if necessary." She took her daughter's hands and continued down the jetway, leaving the pilot and Beverly staring after them. In the terminal, as they walked toward baggage claim, Denise felt her phone buzz with new notifications. She glanced down and saw that her email had already received read receipts from 3 of the executives. Good. They were paying attention. Her next step would require even more visibility. Once they were settled on the shuttle bus to their hotel, Denise opened her social media account where she had a modest following from her legal work. She carefully composed a post. "Traveling with my twin 8-year-old daughters today, we experienced troubling treatment on our flight. They were repeatedly denied bathroom access while the seatbelt sign was on. Yet I watched as other passengers were permitted to go during the same period. When I questioned this inconsistency, I was told there would be consequences for asking. Thankful for the fellow passengers who spoke up in support of my children, including a pediatrician who had to explain that this was becoming a health issue, awaiting the airline's response to my formal complaint. Traveling while black. Parenting journey." She included no names, no specific accusations of discrimination, just the facts. She knew from experience that restraint often created more impact than outrage. She added a sweet photo of the twins from earlier that morning at the departure gate, their excited smiles and matching outfits capturing the joy that should have defined their day. As the shuttle pulled away from the airport, Denise put her phone down and took her daughter's hands. "Who's ready for some magic?" she asked with a genuine smile. "Me," they shouted in unison, their earlier distress momentarily forgotten. But as they chatted excitedly about which rides they wanted to try first, Denise's mind was already mapping out next steps. By the time they checked into their hotel, her social media post had received over 1,000 shares. By dinner time, a reporter from a local news station had sent her a direct message requesting an interview. The wheels of justice were beginning to turn, and Denise Matthews was the one pushing them forward. The first magical day at the theme park had been everything the twins had hoped for. Despite the early morning incident, Denise had managed to keep their spirits high, letting them ride their favorite attractions twice and indulging in colorful treats they rarely got at home. As the girls splashed in the hotel pool before dinner, their laughter was the perfect remedy for the anger still simmering beneath Denise's calm exterior. She sat at the edge of the pool, feet dangling in the cool water, and checked her phone. The notifications were overwhelming. Her social media post had been shared over 15,000 times. Local news stations in both Orlando and Chicago had picked up the story. 3 major news networks had left messages with her office, but most importantly, there were 6 emails from the airline, each one more urgent than the last. The first, sent just 2 hours after they'd landed, was a standard customer service response, offering apologies for any inconvenience and 5,000 bonus miles. Denise almost laughed at how inadequate it was. The second came from the airline's customer relations manager, asking for a phone call to discuss the situation. It arrived just after her social media post started gaining serious traction. The third was from the legal department, sent less than an hour later with carefully worded concern and an offer of a full refund for all their tickets. And on it went, with each response climbing higher in the corporate hierarchy as the story spread. Online. The final email, received just 30 minutes ago, was from the airline's chief operating officer, offering sincere and profound apologies, along with a comprehensive package of vouchers, refunds, and an upgrade to first class on their return flight. But not one of these responses acknowledged the real issue. Not one of them mentioned discrimination, bias, or the humiliation her daughters had experienced. They were offering band-aids in the form of corporate perks, hoping the problem would go away. Denise's phone rang with an unfamiliar Orlando area code. She answered cautiously. "Mrs. Matthews, this is Thomas Wilson, Regional Director for Customer Experience with the airline. I'm so very sorry to interrupt your vacation, but I was hoping we might be able to meet in person to discuss what happened on your flight this morning." Denise watched her daughters playing happily in the water. "Mr. Wilson, I appreciate the call, but as I explained in my email, I expect a formal written response addressing the specific concerns I raised. My family's on vacation and I don't intend to spend it in meetings about your company's failures." "I completely understand," he said quickly, "but I want to assure you that we're taking this very seriously. The flight attendant in question has been placed on administrative leave pending our investigation, and our CEO has personally asked me to offer—" "Mr. Wilson," Denise interrupted, "I don't need offers. I need accountability. If your CEO wants to speak with me, I'm available for a video call tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Otherwise, I'll wait for your formal response before deciding next steps." "Of course," he replied, clearly not used to having his solutions rejected. "I'll arrange the call and send you the details." After hanging up, Denise waved at the twins to come dry off for dinner. As they wrapped themselves in fluffy hotel towels, Kayla looked up thoughtfully. "Mom, are you fighting with the airplane people?" she asked. Denise knelt down to eye level with her daughter. "Not fighting, honey, just making sure they understand that what happened wasn't okay." "Because of how Beverly wouldn't let us use the bathroom," Kiki chimed in, her expression serious beyond her years. "Yes, but it's about more than just that," Denise explained carefully. "It's about making sure everyone gets treated the same way, no matter what they look like or who they are." "Like in your work cases," Kayla nodded, making the connection. "Exactly like that." Denise smiled, amazed at how perceptive her children were. "Now, who's hungry for pizza?" As the evening wore on, Denise received a text from Dr. Lin, who had apparently also been contacted by the airline. "They're scrambling," the text read. "A rep called asking for my side of the story. I told them exactly what I saw. Stay strong." Similar messages came in from Robert and 2 other passengers who had given her their contact information. The airline was definitely in damage control mode. After tucking the exhausted twins into bed, Denise sat on the hotel room's balcony and made a few calls of her own. First to her law partner, bringing him up to speed and asking him to prepare for possible action. Then to a journalist friend who covered corporate accountability issues, giving her an exclusive angle on the story. Just before midnight, her phone pinged with an email notification. It was from the airline's CEO, confirming the 9 a.m. video call, and adding, "I want to personally assure you that what you and your daughters experienced does not reflect our values as a company." Denise sighed. Corporate speak for "please don't sue us." She'd heard it all before. Morning came quickly. The twins were still asleep, crashed from their big day, when Denise set up her laptop for the video call. She dressed professionally, a simple blouse and blazer that conveyed she was taking this seriously. At exactly 9 a.m., her screen filled with faces. The CEO, a middle-aged man with silver hair and a practiced smile. The chief diversity officer, a black woman whose expression was hard to read. The head of flight operations, and of course Thomas Wilson from customer experience. The legal counsel hovered awkwardly in the background, probably recording everything. Mrs. Matthews, thank you for joining us, the CEO began with a practiced smoothness. First, let me say how deeply sorry we are for what happened yesterday. It's completely unacceptable, and we take full responsibility. Denise nodded but remained silent, a technique she often used in negotiations to make the other side uncomfortable enough to keep talking. It worked, the CEO continued, filling the silence. We've placed flight attendant Beverly Winters on administrative leave while we conduct a thorough investigation. We're offering you and your family full compensation for your tickets, additional vouchers for future travel, and an upgrade to first class for your return journey. And, Denise finally said, is there something specific you're looking for, Mrs. Matthews? The legal counsel asked cautiously. I outlined specific requests in my email, Denise replied calmly. Compensation is only one small part of addressing this issue. What about the systemic problems that allowed this to happen in the first place? The chief diversity officer leaned forward. Mrs. Matthews, I can assure you that we take these matters very seriously. We have regular training programs, which clearly aren't working, Denise cut in. My 8-year-old daughters were denied a basic human necessity, while other passengers were accommodated. They were made to feel less than human, and now you're offering us vouchers as if that erases the humiliation they experienced. An uncomfortable silence fell over the video call. What exactly are you looking for here? The legal counsel asked, the question they had all been wanting to ask. Denise took a deep breath. Real change, not just punishing one employee or throwing money at the problem. I want to see concrete steps toward ensuring this never happens to another family. She laid out a comprehensive plan. Mandatory bias training for all customer-facing staff, clear written policies about bathroom access during flights with removal of subjective enforcement, a third-party audit of passenger complaints to identify patterns of discriminatory treatment, and the creation of a passenger bill of rights to be displayed on every flight. The executives listened, some taking notes, others looking increasingly uncomfortable. That's quite extensive, the CEO finally said. Some of these measures would require significant resources and time to implement. So does a class action lawsuit and the accompanying PR nightmare, Denise replied evenly. My daughters aren't the first to experience this kind of treatment, just the first whose mother happens to be a civil rights attorney, with the knowledge and resources to push back. She let that sink in before continuing. I'm giving you an opportunity to be part of the solution, to turn this incident into meaningful change that could actually improve your company's culture and reputation. The question is whether you're willing to take it. As she spoke, she noticed Kiki standing in the doorway of the bedroom listening quietly. Denise gave her daughter a reassuring smile, realizing that this moment was teaching her children something powerful, that they deserved respect, and that sometimes you had to stand firm to create change. The chief diversity officer broke the ice in silence. Mrs. Matthews, would you be willing to work with us on developing these initiatives? Your expertise would be invaluable. It wasn't the response Denise had expected. For a moment, she considered the offer. Maybe there was a way to create more impact from within. I'll consider it, she said finally. But first, I need a formal written commitment to these changes, with specific timelines and accountability measures, and a public statement acknowledging what happened and how you plan to address it. We can get you that by end of day, the CEO said quickly, relief evident in his voice. As the call ended, Kiki came over and climbed into her mother's lap. Did you win? She asked innocently. Denise hugged her daughter close. It's not about winning, baby. It's about making things better for next time. But as she closed her laptop, Denise knew this was just the beginning. The airline's initial response had been predictable: damage control, appeasement, and vague promises. The real test would be whether they followed through with meaningful action. For now, though, there were roller coasters to ride and ice cream to eat. The fight for justice would continue, but today belonged to her daughters. 3 wonderful but exhausting days of theme parks, character breakfasts, and souvenir shopping had passed. The twins had met their favorite princesses, screamed on roller coasters, and collected more stuffed animals than their suitcases could possibly hold. Through it all, Denise had been fully present with her daughters, setting aside the airline situation during daylight hours, but each night, after the girls fell asleep, she had been working. Reviewing the airline's written commitment, to change that had arrived as promised, consulting with her law partner back in Chicago, speaking with civil rights organizations that had reached out after her story went viral, and fielding calls from other families who had experienced similar treatment but lacked the resources or knowledge to fight back. On their 4th morning, in Orlando as they ate breakfast by the hotel pool, Denise's phone rang. It was April Washington, the airline's chief diversity officer. "Mrs. Matthews, I hope I'm not disturbing your vacation," April began. "I wanted to touch base before you head home tomorrow. Our team has been working around the clock on the action plan we discussed, and I have some updates I thought you might want to hear." Denise excused herself from the table, moving a few steps away while keeping an eye on the twins. "I'm listening." "First, we've already begun drafting the new bathroom access policy you suggested. It will clearly state that bathroom access is permitted during seatbelt illumination for all passengers unless there is severe turbulence, with no discretionary enforcement by crew members. We're also implementing a tracking system for bathroom access denials to monitor for patterns." That was a good start, but Denise waited for more. "Second, we've engaged a respected civil rights organization to review our training materials and help us redesign our bias training program for all staff." "Which organization?" Denise asked sharply. April named a well-respected group that Denise had worked with in the past, a genuine partnership, not just window dressing. "Good choice," Denise acknowledged. Continue. "Third, our passenger Bill of Rights is being drafted and will be prominently displayed on our website, apps, and in seatback materials on every flight by next month. And finally, we've scheduled the third-party audit of passenger complaints to begin next week." Denise was impressed despite herself. These were substantive steps, not the empty promises she'd expected. "And Beverly?" she asked, referring to the flight attendant. April hesitated. "Personnel matters are confidential, but I can tell you she is no longer with the company." Denise nodded, though April couldn't see her through the phone. "And the public statement?" "That's actually why I'm calling. Our CEO would like to issue it tomorrow, and we'd appreciate your input on the draft I just sent to your email." After the call, Denise returned to the breakfast table where Kiki and Kayla were debating which water slide to try first that day. "Everything okay, Mom?" Kayla asked, always sensitive to her mother's moods. "Actually, yes," Denise said, surprising herself with how true it felt. "I think we helped make some real changes." "To the airplane rules?" Kiki asked, munching on a piece of toast. "Exactly, so other kids won't have the same bad experience you did." "Good," said Kayla firmly. "Nobody should feel like that." Out of the mouths of babes, Denise thought. Later that evening, while the girls packed their new treasures for the trip home, Denise reviewed the airline's draft statement. It was better than she'd expected, acknowledging the unacceptable treatment experienced by the Matthews family, explicitly mentioning discriminatory behavior without hedging, and outlining the concrete steps being taken in response. She made a few edits, strengthening certain points, then sent it back with her approval. The next morning, as their vacation came to an end and they prepared for their flight home, the statement was released to the media. By the time they reached the airport, it had been picked up by major news outlets. Denise felt a flutter of anxiety as they approached the airline's check-in counter. Would there be awkwardness or resentment from the staff? But the agent who helped them was extra courteous, and the girls were given special wings pins usually reserved for first-time flyers. "We've upgraded your family to first class," the agent said quietly, "and the flight crew has been personally briefed on your situation." "Thank you," Denise replied, "but I hope you're not treating us differently just because of what happened." The agent's smile turned genuine. Actually, Mrs. Matthews, there's a new memo that came down this morning about bathroom access policy during flights. The whole company is talking about it. And, well, many of us are glad someone finally made this change happen. As they made their way to security, Denise noticed how several airline employees seemed to recognize them, giving small nods of acknowledgement or friendly smiles. "Mom, look who it is!" Kiki suddenly exclaimed, pointing toward the gate area. Dr. Lin was waiting near their gate, pulling her own carry-on suitcase. "What are the chances?" Denise said with a smile as they approached. "Heading home too?" "Conference. Ended yesterday," Dr. Lin explained. "And yes, same flight, but that's not a coincidence. I actually switched my flight to be on yours." "You did? Why?" Dr. Lin looked around and lowered her voice. "Word spread through passenger forums about the changes you made happen. A bunch of us who witnessed what happened wanted to be here for the return flight. A sort of, silent support system." Denise was stunned. "How many is a bunch?" "Just wait and see," Dr. Lin said with a smile. As boarding began, Denise noticed Robert, the retired HR director, waiting in line. He gave them a thumbs up. Then, she spotted the gentleman who had been allowed to use the bathroom during the seatbelt sign illumination, now making a point of saying hello to the twins. One by one, familiar faces appeared. At least 6 passengers who had witnessed the original incident were on this return flight, having changed their plans to be there. It wasn't organized as a protest or confrontation, but rather as a quiet show of solidarity. The flight home couldn't have been more different from their outbound journey. The crew was professional and warm. The captain even came to personally welcome them aboard. And when the twins needed to use the bathroom, even during a brief period when the seatbelt sign was on, the flight attendant escorted them without hesitation. 6 months later, Denise stood at a podium in the airline's headquarters. Behind her was a large banner reading "Equality Takes Flight," introducing our industry-leading passenger Bill of Rights. The twins stood beside her, looking a bit older, and a lot more confident in their matching blue dresses. What had begun as a consulting arrangement, with Denise providing input on the airline's new policies, had evolved into something much more significant. The changes had expanded far beyond bathroom access to address a range of equity issues in air travel. And the airline, after initial resistance, had embraced the opportunity to become an industry leader in this area. After the formal presentation, as reporters gathered around for questions, a young journalist asked the twins what they thought about all the changes that had happened because of their experience. Kiki thought for a moment before answering. "It feels good to know that when something unfair happens, you can speak up and make it better. Not just for yourself," Kayla added, "but for everybody." Looking at her daughters, Denise felt a surge of pride that went beyond their handling of this specific situation. They had learned perhaps the most important lesson she could teach them, that their voices mattered, that injustice should be challenged, and that change, real, meaningful change, was possible. As they left the podium, Denise overheard a conversation between 2 airline executives walking behind them. "Who would have thought," one said quietly to the other, "that the best thing to happen to this company's culture would start with 2 little girls needing to use the bathroom?" "And one mother who refused to let it go," the other replied. Denise smiled to herself as she took her daughter's hands. Sometimes the biggest changes started with the smallest moments, and sometimes, just sometimes, standing up for what was right created ripples that turned into waves.